I'm Melissa Hicks, Senior Director with C2HR, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the latest installment of our HR Learning Series. Today's program is focused on employee well-being, and it will be recorded and available for on-demand viewing. We're able to offer free quality education programs for C2HR's members, thanks to the generous support of our 2023 sponsors, including Grokr. In addition to today's content, we will be hosting an HR Learning Series webinar on November 8th that will feature human capital trends throughout the world, and that will be presented by Deloitte. And we invite you to attend that program. We'd like today's webinar to be interactive and invite you to post questions and comments in the chat. SHRM has approved this webinar for 1 CE credit, and that code will be emailed to you after the program. Today's webinar is going to be moderated by Grokr CEO, Lorna Bornstein. Lorna has been leading Grokr since 2012 and is driving the company's mission to make holistic health and well-being equitable, easy, and engaging for every member of the global workforce. Lorna is an expert on well-being and organizational culture. She is deeply passionate about helping organizations create a culture of purpose, belonging, and balance. She partners with C-suite leaders, giving them strategic and tactical guidance on creating transformational change, improving employee engagement, and driving business results. Lorna, we are thrilled to have you with us today to moderate this discussion. Would you like to introduce our other panelists?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Melissa. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm beaming in from California, Northern California in the Bay Area. And my esteemed panelists today are split from quite different areas of the country. We've got East Coast and West Coast. So let me introduce you first to Victoria Alvarez. Victoria serves as the Director of Wellbeing and Engagement at Warner Brothers Discovery, and it's been an exciting ride in her role, especially with the merger that has happened over the last year-ish. Victoria is actually working for the global population of, how many employees are you now combined, Victoria?
We are about 30,000 employees, and then we have a lot of production and other staff. So it's a really big organization now.
And she provides programming for those 30,000 plus employees all over the world, and this 360 degree approach to well-being. Victoria and her team, they really strive, and I know this because we've worked with them for many years now. They really strive to have a localized, regionalized, relevant approach to the benefits and to well-being at the company. And I think that makes a big difference in terms of meeting employees where they are, but not just physically, but culturally, sociodynamically. And also they offer an interesting variety of resources that support this big employee base. So we'll hear from a bunch of those topics on that from Victoria today. And also joining us, we have Shelley McCready, who has been at WOW for over 5 years now. And although the company is headquartered in Denver, she is now coming to us from Arizona. And she's the Senior Manager of Benefits and Employee Wellbeing, and has been both designing and implementing these comprehensive benefits. I know a lot of our clients, you have different people designing than the implementing. She gets to do both. And has had some really amazing successes that have fostered a really positive work environment, but also we'll be talking specifically around the results, employee engagement, and employee satisfaction that has been the result of the work that Shelley has done. And I think, Shelley introduces a very innovative approach to programs and to personalized, wellness and well-being incentives, and has contributed to really improving the health of the workforce at WOW. So welcome, Shelley. Welcome. And welcome to today's, what should be a very interactive discussion that we're going to have. Go ahead. Sorry.
I just said
Okay.
thank you for having me. It's good to
Very
be here.
happy, very happy to have you both. Also love having, smart, powerful, knowledgeable women in the industry to talk to. So one of the things that is sort of primary in certainly the work that I do, and I work with a lot of CEOs and CFOs, not just the chief people officers, is the importance of, both the proof that well-being is having an impact on the company. And I think that what's really interesting is that what I hear and what's reported, not just me, what I'm hearing from boards of directors, CEOs, CFOs, CPOs, is that it's part of the business imperative now that we care for our employees and for their well-being. This wasn't the case 10 years ago. It was a nice to have, not a need to have. Some of the stats, though, that come out, for example, there's a World Economic Forum study that came out showing that 45% of employees still feel that their employers either don't really or never support their well-being. There's more than 80% of workers who were surveyed who say that their stress levels are the same or higher than before the pandemic. And nearly 30% of employees have actually left their employer in the last 5 years due to a lack of support for their health and well-being. And then the last step before we get into the questions, that employees who strongly agree that their employer cares for their well-being, right? There's over 70% more likely to remain with the company. And those who feel that their employers don't care about their well-being are 70% more likely to quit and to suffer from burnout. So it's sort of, we know it matters. But what, we're seeing is that while 64% of employers plan to make enhancements to their benefits packages, even in economic headwinds, we're planning on spending more money. And this is across the board. We're not sure that we're always spending the money on things that are going to make a difference, that we're going to be able to demonstrate that and protect our budgets. So Victoria, we'll start with you because, we've been working together for a while. What are you focused on now in order to show that it's at least being utilized? Like where's your focus in, in this global task that you have of engaging your employees in their well-being and how you can prove it?
Sure. So we, have been through a lot. I think just the world today, the only constant is change, and everyone seems to be across the board, across different industries, seems to be doing more with less. And so we were really, I think, as a company, trying to approach well-being from a more holistic perspective. So it's not just mental health, right? It's not just making sure you have access to a gym. It's not just, making sure that you have a backup care program for you. So it's really approaching it from all aspects. And so we really follow the 5 dimensions of well-being, which we identify as mental health, physical health, social well-being, financial well-being, and family well-being. And ultimately, this all affects your mental health and your physical, it all affects everything, right? So when one area of your well-being, your personal well-being is kind of off kilter, it affects the rest, which also affects you and how you're productive you are at work. How much, if you don't have the resources in your personal life to, go to the gym, if you don't have, for example, we work with Grokr, if you don't have access to fitness, maybe you can get it virtually, and that's something that will make a difference for you. And then if you can do that at home, you can be a better employee, right? So I think ultimately it's approaching well-being from a wider, broader lens rather than just like, oh, here's what we're going to do to check the box, right? We're really hoping to make a true impact and not just saying, okay, well, we do this. We're not going to check if it's working or not. We check, we check in with our employees. We have data through pulse surveys. We have anecdotal data. We connect with people regularly. We work very closely with our HR teams as well to gauge what's happening in the business. How are people feeling? What do people need to feel supported and feel well at work?
So then if we just take that broader point, which is, the lens that you have, the 5 dimensions, that it's the whole person basically, and not just the one thing that you're focused on today. Shelley, I'm wondering what, your focus is on, and is it similar or different?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm writing down family, family well-being, because we have 4 pillars, if you will, same as you guys, except for the family well-being. And in 2024, we are adding resources for family planning. So I was like, well, which bucket does it fall in, and the other 4? But I'm like, might have to copy Victoria and create a 5th, because I think that's great. And just like you said, they're all so intertwined. Just using the family planning as an example, we know that the journey to building a family is different for so many people now. There's just different paths that you can go down, whether it's adoption or surrogacy. Infertility is still an issue. Women are having babies later and later in life and are struggling with that. But, when there's the stress of trying to build a family, it impacts you at work. There's a financial aspect to that, because it's not inexpensive to get this kind of treatment. So it does, it all intertwines. So yeah, I think I might mimic you, Victoria.
Well, I think,
That's a great idea.
It's interesting, many years ago, I think it's when we first started working, it was either with Disney or with Aetna prior and CVS Health. This came up a lot about, well, what about, how do you help with women in the workplace who the number 1 complaint is they don't have enough time. That's consistently the number 1 complaint, by the way, they don't have enough time. And so that was when I know my team at Rocker first came out with both the prenatal and the postnatal suite of content and services that we have, which, we're talking about before that, it was just physical, emotional, financial, and social well-being. And then it was like, oh, but what does that mean? And so, you put it under family. It was more, how do you thread the needle all the way through and make sure that then people know about it? And what is interesting is, 95% of what one can retain, or when you watch a video, you retain 95% of the message. You only retain 10% if it's via text. And so one of the questions that was being, was like, don't make me read. Don't push me. Don't make me work. Just deliver it to me easily. Make it, I want it on a smartphone, but I want to scroll. I don't even want to bother. They don't even want to tap anymore. The clicking is too much effort. It's just scroll until you get what you need. But the video just keeps playing, which kind of, when I think about what's so hard with what you're implementing, is how do you even get people to be aware of these programs, because they don't want to read, they don't have time, they're all pressed. I'm just curious what you're doing in your environments to boost awareness of the benefit programs that you do offer. Shelley, I don't know if you want to take this one first.
Sure. And, WOW is significantly smaller than Victoria. We've got about 1,400 employees, and we struggle. I mean, it's, doesn't matter what you're trying to communicate to your employees. Some people sit in front of their computers all day and they'll get an email, or they can get to our company intranet page. And then we've got, a large population that is not in front of a computer and they're out in the field. So how do we get to them? So we tried different avenues, right? We're hoping that a text message will work for this population. And for those people that are sitting at their computer, an email. We created a pretty robust company intranet page several years ago. And part of that is we have what we call communities. So there's various communities throughout the company, from leadership to engagement to a well-being community. And people follow it. So it's sort of like a social media page, if you will. But this is where we've got our different categories of wellness, and we will post videos, links to resources and everything. And then this is where we really try to draw people to. So we've got that one source of information. And so people will remember and make it easy. But like I said, it's a struggle. And, you can hand them everything on the platter, but how do they feed from the platter? So
Victoria, how about you? What do you want to share on how you're doing this?
Yeah, I think we use every type of method and form of communication that's available to us. I think we live in a world where everything is important and there's so much that's being sent and communicated to employees, not just well-being, company updates, events happening. So I think it's really that multifaceted approach where one size fits one, to Shelley's point, like not everybody accesses information the same way. So for us, we do have our intranet as well. We also have a social well-being. We use Facebook for work, which is called Workplace, and we do have a global well-being page there where we post videos, we share updates, anything that's happening virtually, we'll post there. Any on-site activation. So if we're having an event physically in an office, we'll post on the local page. We also have electronic signage, so e-boards. We try to leverage word of mouth as much as possible. I think there's nothing like word of mouth, right? This is an oldie but a goodie. So leveraging our PNC, which is our HR partners, leveraging employees, having networks. Our BRGs are a great resource for communication as well. It's really how can we get it out there and hope that we throw all the noodles to the wall that like a few of them stick, right? So that's short answer, but
so I think that's great. I think it's
movable.
also important, the distinction between 1,400 and 30,000. You can get messages across to 1,400 in different ways than when you have 30,000, especially when you're geographically incredibly dispersed. I think the key is to what and you know, when we take on the comms for clients, you know, like CVS or Target or Amazon, like you name it, that really the principles are multimodal and segmented communications are the key. And so the three pieces to that are: one, the list. Who are you communicating with? Like, how are you segmenting? So it's not the same thing to everyone. And that's where you have an intranet, and that's great, but it's the push versus the weight to pull, because they need. So first, how do you segment your list? The second thing is, how do you segment and target your message? Because it's not the same communication. Even if ultimately it's the same content, you do not communicate it in the same way. So a 56-year-old, a Black male employee at a distribution center in Wisconsin needs to be spoken to differently about back pain than a 32-year-old prenatal Caucasian woman in New York City. So there's the list part, and then the message will be different. And frankly, we're going to give them the same, some of it will be the same programming, but you're going to communicate why they need it differently. You're not going to use the word yoga with him, but stretching and things that resonate. And then the third piece is mode, right? So you talked about, Victoria, whether it's SMS or text. If you have manufacturing, we have a lot of manufacturing clients. QR codes in break rooms where they can scan something onto their phone, right? Opting in for messages that are mobile as opposed to videos, frankly. But so I think, when I hear what you're doing, you guys are doing it all across the board, and that's, multimodal, segmented, and make sure that you've got different messages for different people. One of the things that comes out of a lot of the work that I do with the C-suite is there seems to be some, again, real cognitive dissonance between what is being reported by employers and what is being reported by their teams. So 75% of C-suite leaders, according to this Deloitte report I'm looking at, report that their workforce's health has improved in the last year. Meanwhile, 66% of those employees reported that that was actually the reverse. It's gotten worse, not better. And 80% of respondents report their well-being is actually, or lack of it, is fueling their job-related stress. So these are really different reports that are coming in. And I think what is common is that the stress, the fear of burnout, the feeling that we're doing more with less, Victoria, to the point that you made earlier, it's falling on the shoulders of these workers. When we talk about addressing burnout and work-related stress, what are you doing in that area, Victoria?
Sure. So, across the globe, we're all connected, especially, at Warner Brothers Discovery, we've got a lot of employees working across a lot of different time zones. And we work off our phones and we're under this pressure to perform, right? I think across the globe in any industry, that's just a reality of the world right now. And so I think, perspective is really important, and that's something that we're pushing to. And there's certain things that we cannot control. So if it's workload or having to work across time zones, but it's really focusing on what can you control? Can you take 10 minutes to watch a Grokr video? Can you take 5 minutes to step outside and really just own your well-being, and encouraging not only employees to own their own well-being, but encouraging managers and leaders to kind of set the tone to encourage employees to leverage the resources, because we can communicate the resources all we want. Everybody's got a wonderful array of resources for employees. I think across most companies at this point, there's not a shortage of support for employees. It's just having the time, like you're saying, to actually to leverage them and to take advantage of them. So I think it's really it's part of encouraging employees to own their well-being, encouraging leaders to own it. It's everyone's kind of responsibility to come together and say, like, we gotta just take the time. We have 5 minutes. Will make such a difference if you can see the sun for 5 minutes on your face, right?
And the thing that's so interesting about that is, a lot of companies still struggle with stigma that you're going to look lazy or uncommitted, or I don't want people knowing. And so that when you say it's really what you're saying, like giving people permission is a good starting point. And I know, this is a Disney example where they actually recognized that there was stigma attached to mental health, and they wanted to change that. And so we created like a whole program for them around and measuring the improvement in stigma reduction and making it okay not to be okay, and creating challenges with incentives actually to show we are giving you permission and we're putting our money where our mouth is. Like, we want you to care about this. Shelley, what are you finding about this? Do you have to give them permission, or are there other things that you're focusing on?
So, as far as measurement goes, we do a pulse survey as well. And once a month, all of our employees get that. And between 2017 and 2022, the well-being score went up 48%. So yeah, it's a big improvement, but there wasn't much there if anything, in 2017. So there was plenty of room for improvement, but 48% is a big increase. So, again, just putting a well-being program in place, I think people really felt that we cared about them, and it just keeps growing. And, since the pandemic, and with our offices in Victoria, I don't know if you've got employees back working in the office or if you're still remote, but, our company made the decision that it was working fine. I mean, people were just as productive working from home. So we were remote. Those of us that work in the office, and we've got the field employees, but when you're at home and your computer is always there, you feel that pressure to work. You hear it ding and you're like, oh, there's an email. And so I think it's gotten a little bit more difficult to take that time for self-care since we've all been working from home. And you almost get that feeling of, if my manager pings me and I don't answer, is he going to think I'm slacking,
Yeah.
And you're just like, I got to be there all the time. And we really do stress from the top down, from our senior leaders, managers, all the way down, that they need to reach out to their employees and tell them it's okay. Block time out on your calendar, and then they need to honor that, if they see that you've got time off. But truly take that time for yourself. And we added 2 more personal days for employees. So again, trying to encourage those self-care days, take those days off. We unlimited PTO, which is probably not different than most companies out there for directors and above, but again, just take the time. You need to do it. So again, communication,
Well, it's interesting. At the very beginning of the pandemic, 2 things happened, which what you're saying resonate with me. One is, one of the other companies that we've worked with for many years is the Mandarin Oriental Hotel Group. And imagine everyone went home. No one was traveling. No one's going into work. And there were major issues with mental health. People were really scared and lonely and isolated. And so their team did something so easy to ask for, but it's like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? Every single manager in the entire company was told that they had to first write a postcard. They provided postcards with something, short, sweet, but personal, just saying, I care and hope that you're taking care of yourself. And every manager had to send that to every one of their direct reports. So that was the first thing, just that simple. I care. I hope you're doing something right. So it's, I care. And then the second thing that they then instituted shortly after that was every manager needed to speak, like actually talk, not text, not, had to speak with each of their direct reports at least once every 14 days. So it's like, just, you think like, and see how they're doing. And it's like so basic, but we don't, if you don't make it okay, if your senior leaders aren't, my grandma used to always say, a fish stinks from the head down. That if I don't live the value and don't share it, then they're going to be scared because they're going to know that I don't really mean it. What would you think I obviously know a lot more about Warner Brothers Discovery, but I'm curious what either one of you would want to share. Anything that is either unique in your approach, specifically when we're talking about mental health, that might surprise the attendees today, or something particularly notable that you want to share about what you have tried or what you're doing?
I'll speak. So one of the things that we implemented effective 1/1/2023 was, we have 2 PPO plans and then an HSA plan. On the PPO plans, we removed copays for all mental health visits. So we really want to encourage people to get that help. And we see our visits going up, and part of me is like, oh no, there's that many more people who are experiencing mental health issues. But then you sit back and you go, no, they probably were experiencing all that all along. And now that they don't have to, pay to see a therapist once a week, they're getting the help that they need. So that's, and I'm
That's
really
amazing.
curious to get more reports, after the end of the year, to compare to previous years. But so far that has been very well received.
And the thing that, again, just to build on what you're saying, what I love about the insight from you is like, your reaction wasn't, oh my God, so many people are using this. It was, wow, there's so many more people than we knew that needed this. And ultimately that goes to reducing turnover, which, if I want to ask you, how do you report on this? I'll tell you how we report to our clients on it. We give all the engagement and retention, engagement stats and utilization and insights and segment. We do all that, but we also every year now provide our retention report. And literally we have an economic model now to show the number of jobs saved because of what the work is that the clients have done. And that's like, so your point, Jelly, I'm like, yes, because then you can actually show jobs saved. And we have an economic model that we worked with an actuarial firm to develop, but it's precisely to your point. This has true value. Don't think of it as a cost center. Think of it as an area where you must invest in order to get the return. Victoria, anything surprising or notable that you do a lot that you want to share?
Sure. I think, so October 10th, as many people joining probably know, is World Mental Health Day, and we recognize throughout the month. And so our approach generally with anything mental health related is to address all 5 pillars of well-being. And so we had a good number of, and every week we've hosted financial well-being sessions. And those of you who were at the C2HR conference might have met Erica Wasserman, who's your financial therapist, and really talking about the emotional kind of mental health factor when it comes to financial well-being. And so a lot of times our financial well-being courses are focused on how to save, how to put money into your 401k, how to plan for college, things that are very kind of transactional. But we don't often talk about how the emotions related to money. And it's such a it can be such a heated conversation with your partner or with your friends or family or whatever. And it kind of, if you think about, if anyone watches Friends, the Friends episode where they all are going out to dinner and, Rachel and Joey and Phoebe are like, we can't afford these dinners, like, but it's the awkward conversation and like, how do we handle that? And these are our best friends. And so it's really addressing that. And so that's something that we've found has been very popular with employees. Employees really appreciate these sessions and just that kind of other aspect to financial planning, where in financial well-being, where yes, it's absolutely important to know and to have the resources to plan for, your 529 or plan for college or plan for buying a house. But it's also those things that affect like the stress of, I'm going to be in a relationship with somebody and nope, they don't know my financial situation. I don't know how to talk about it. And so many of us grew up with these kind of stigmas around talking about money. That's kind of one thing that I can pull out from our mental health month. And we have a regular series of programming around financial well-being and more of like that mental health kind of factor there.
Yeah. And I think that, what's so obvious, and maybe it's so obvious to us because of, you, because of your job, to me, because of the scope of the clients that we work with, is that it's really, when you think about the social determinants of health and you actually look at health, it's holistic, right? And then you understand that, actually, when I want to work on nutrition, financial is a huge factor in, am I in a food desert? Do I have access to fresh produce and vegetables? And can I afford it if I do? I'm working, maybe I'm working 2 jobs if I'm a frontline worker. How am I going to have time to cook? And so what's interesting is that a lot of the experts that we work with to develop our products, feature, our programming, a lot of what they think about is the cultural relevance of that to the employee bases that we're working with globally. And I think the companies that do make that connection, that these are not monoliths, it's not finance and it's not mental health. This truly, that it's intertwined, it's integrated, and there's all these, codependencies really are far ahead. One thing that was really interesting, I was recently down in Minneapolis visiting Target, and one of the things that Melissa, their CHRO, was sharing was, we don't necessarily need any new partners. What we need is to make sure that the ones that we have are connecting to each other and that everything is fitting together in the employee's best interest. And I think that's harder to do in practice than one would like, and but critical. And this primary need for financial security and for psychological safety being connected. I don't know if your leadership, if you've had the experience of, in your listening tours, hearing how your employees feel and how leadership responds maybe to some of their difficulties and how that plays into your programming. Like you talked about your employee engagement, pulse surveys, et cetera. How does that loop? How do you then communicate back? How do you get the information and communicate it back to leadership?
I can start. Shelley, you want to start?
Okay. You can go for it.
So when we did our employee survey, and the results are actually shared back with the leaders from our CEO down and his direct reports. And so it becomes part of their responsibility as leaders to follow up with their teams. Okay. on the survey results and the feedback that's given from employees. So it's a close partnership between our people analytics team, our people and culture partners, which are our HR business partners, and the leadership team. And then that kind of trickles down to each level. And so it's really, and it is a responsibility of the leadership team to ensure that the points on the survey are being met. Also, our CEO's goals are often, kind of a trickle down from the survey. They have, there's different areas of focus that a company will announce post survey, like, hey, we got the results. Here's where we were great. Here's where there's room for improvement. And then kind of what does that look like in terms of output for employees? I know one of our priorities is still well-being. I think it was well-being before the survey, it's well-being after the survey, and just continuing to promote employee well-being and our programming there. So when we do also like those pulse surveys and we get feedback from employees, it's a quick turnaround of like, hey, we heard you in the survey. Here's the program that you asked for.
So just to follow up on that question, so you do the pulse, like the practical takeaway for the audience, you do your pulse surveys, you provide reporting to leadership, and then
employees, sorry, they're also announced to employees. And then, so it's a very transparent situation, it's very transparent, right? There's no secrets, you know what you submitted as an employee. And so the feedback is what it is. I think it's being practical, and like what you ask, you should be prepared to deliver on. So I think whenever we ask and we pulse employees, we want to make sure that their feedback is something we can deliver on. So and generally, like, okay, stress is a factor. It's usually going to come up in some type of survey. So you have to be ready to act on it. And what can you provide employees to support the feedback that they're sharing with you?
Yeah. How often do you do employee surveys? Not the pulse surveys, but just the overall employee survey?
So it's a new company, so we've had one so far.
Okay.
And that was, so it would usually, I don't know, around once a year, but with other
Okay.
pulse surveys between.
And Shelley,
no, I'm not speaking on behalf of the company.
Shelley, I will tell you across our portfolio, for larger organizations, it's typically once a year. I almost never see it more often. However, what they have us do for them, because they're only doing it once a year, is they're having us do lots of surveys along the way during the year for them. Yeah. And that is what to me is so interesting. It's like there's this corporate, okay, one time a year, but then they want to know, particularly in certain areas of the business, again, segmented. And we will do surveying for them on that. And that will happen on a much more regular basis, but it's not the behemoth survey, right? It's right. Specifically, what are you looking or trying to track for? What do you all do at WOW?
So, as I mentioned before, we do those monthly pulse surveys. And since I've been at WOW in 5 years, we've only done one bigger survey. And it's something that I struggle with. I wish we did it once a year. And for the exact reason that Victoria said, you've got to be careful in how you ask those questions, because you've got to be ready to react, So the questions it was more of a benefit survey, if you will, but we did tie some well-being in there. But they were, our senior leaders were hesitant to ask any open-ended questions because they didn't know what was going to come back. So it was helpful, the results, but I just feel like it could have been so much more, and we could have gotten so much more out of it. And I'm hoping that in the near future, we can do another one and get more feedback from employees.
Well, the point you just made, so Jyoti Chopra, who's the CHRO of MGM Resorts International, she was on a podium with me at a conference board this past spring. And she was talking about exactly what you're talking about, which is if you're going to do the survey, you have to then spring into action to tell the respondents, here's what we heard, and here's what we're going to be doing about it. Even if what we're going to be doing about it is we're going to have to listen harder because we don't have a plan yet. And that was one of the key, one of her key messages was you have to listen, and then you have to show that you've heard. Yeah. And then the other thing that's interesting at a lot of our clients, but including MGM, all the executive leaders, like, so every department, improving employee engagement scores is one of their MBOs. So it's not just HR's responsibility. And so that to me is just so much bigger and better than it just being on the shoulders of total rewards, or, because I don't know, like, Victoria, do you feel, and I know it's a new company and we're moving forward, but do you feel you have any ideas on how you get executive leaders to actually engage in a deeper way? Like, I don't know if there's an employee engagement score imperative across, Zaslav's organization. What's it like, and what do you think might be,
I think it's establishing well-being at our company does sit within people and culture, HR, but it's establishing relationships with our P&C partners. So we're a specialist function, we're a COE. We really focus on our partnership and relationship with our people and culture partners, who are truly business partners to the leadership team, right? So I think something that's really, I don't know that, I think it's unique in my experience that HR is truly looked at as a business partner by the leadership team. All of our leaders are like, hand in glove with our P&C partners. And I think it's establishing that level of trust and relationship to say, I am as your people and culture partner, right? I am your advisor. And as a leader, it's your responsibility. DEI doesn't just sit with DEI. Well-being doesn't just sit with well-being and HR. It is truly the responsibility of the leader to live it. And that's part of your responsibility as a leader. That's what you're taking on, right? When you're managing these large teams of people.
And one of the pieces of advice that often I've heard, really great people leaders share is, when you're trying to get that buy-in from the business partner, it's understanding how to present the case to them that shows the impact on their business. So, the content might be exactly the same, but frankly, the pitching of it is a little bit different. And Victoria knows this, but Shelley, you may not. The reason why I wrote my book, The Business Case for Caring, was because I kept being asked by my CHRO clients, friends, partners, to help them write business cases to be able and just go and justify things. And I'm like, I got so tired of helping them write business cases. I just put it in a book and said, everybody can have this. It's not, but it's getting that understanding that first you have to understand them, but then it's then knowing how to get their buy-in to see how this is going to help their businesses. And that annual report that I mentioned that we do now for clients, I present that to the CFO. And I want to go talk to the CFO, because then they see how many millions of dollars they've saved every year with all the jobs that were saved. So I don't know, Shelley, if you have some other insights into because you seem to have done a lot in 5 years. It's pretty remarkable. You must have gotten, engagement from your leadership. What's that been like for you?
Just like Victoria said, it's years ago, HR wasn't a business partner. They were there, they hired people, they fired people. People came to their office when they were unhappy, it was the fluff or whatever, but it has evolved. And, at WOW as well, we truly are considered a business partner. And I have an accounting degree. Don't ask me why I did that, but I'm a numbers financial person. So I work very closely with their finance team. And just as you said, you've got an idea, and to get it past the financial leaders, you've got to present it one way because they're just going to see numbers. And then, it might be your information technology officer. How do you get them to buy in? And then you're going more towards, you can hire people and they're going to stay if we have, these sorts of resources for our employees. But they listen, and I'm very, and CEO down at our company are very, very, open to new ideas and how we can make life better for our employees and attract and retain. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, it is the goal. It is one of the questions that I do get the most is, how do I what's your advice on getting executive buy-in? You know, they're saying the right things, but they don't want to participate. They're saying the right things, but I can't get the engagement from the executives, and they've got the leverage. What I don't hear talked about quite as much, and which we see as a real need because we're being asked by our clients for this, is help for middle managers in how they can, you know, both cope with what their struggles are, but how do they talk to their teams? How can they help their teams? How do you influence? And, you know, there's a study that was published in Fortune magazine that showed that 46% of middle managers were planning to quit within the next 1 to 2 years. Just so, I don't know if Victoria, you were nodding real like early when I mentioned the middle management problem. Yeah,
I think it's not unique, right? I think across the board, part of the what needs to happen is empowerment, right? And middle managers need to be empowered, and I think it comes from partially from the leadership team. I think it's from, as an organization, we need to do better across the board. I think I talk to people in other industries as well who deal with the same thing. I don't think it's specific to WBD or to, you know, one company, but encouraging middle managers to kind of own their own well-being and kind of be a role model to their teams, and say, and if it's, you know, shortening your team meetings, or if it's having, if you're all in the same location, which for us is hardly ever the case, but if you happen to be in the same location, do a walking meeting, right? Encourage employees to going back to this, you know, idea of owning your well-being. As a middle manager, be informed about what the resources are, and own your position, position as a people manager. You need to know what's happening in the business. It's part of your responsibility when you're managing someone else, right? But it's really providing tools, and that's something that we're focusing on for 2024 in the context of mental health, and how do we better prepare our middle managers to have a lot of these conversations. It's sometimes, oftentimes it's a manager being like, hey, PNC partner, like, I don't know what to do here. And so to help kind of bridge that gap just a bit, where you still want PNC to be involved or HR to be involved to an extent, depending on the situation, but so it's not a constant influx to the HR team of, like, anytime there's a situation that a middle manager might not have the response. So better preparing them and empowering them, I think that's our goal, at least.
and toward the empowerment point, I don't know if this ended up happening because of a request that came from your team, Victoria, but I know that when we launched our most recent mental health guide, which was on stress, we actually have a track that's specifically for managers. And that's so that they can have this cohorted experience. They can talk to each other and not feel so alone, but also be given specific tips, tricks, advice.
It's also, I think, so part of what we in our learning and development team does a great job at this. They do have cohorts and learning series specific to different levels of employees and managers. Like, they have some for people managers. We have a program called Leading At, which is for all people managers. That's more of like, here's everything you need to know as a people manager. So we're definitely working toward, you know, building that empowerment within the company. And then from a well-being and engagement team perspective, we're working on like the mental health specific focus. But yeah, across the board, and our learning and development team does a wonderful job focusing on that cohort of employees.
Shelley, anything you want to add on that?
You know, we definitely have the same focus in really trying to give our managers the tools to, you know, using mental health as an example. We did a kind of like a webinar for them on how they can, you know, notice different mental health, you know, triggers, if you will, or symptoms in their employees, and how to manage that. We created a one-page document, so that's real quick for them to go to. If an employee does come to them, they've got all of our resources right there so that they can share those with the employee. So we have a leadership community, same thing, just really trying to, just like Victoria said, empower them, so that they can take the lead and help employees and lead by example. So our HR business partners meet with their managers on a regular basis and are always striving to give them the resources and just encouraging them to lead by example.
Yeah. We're gonna, I actually, there's some questions that were sent to me that I'll get into in a minute. Now we're getting to Q&A now, people. So if you want to post something in the chat, please do. Just click chat and put your questions in there and we'll do our best to answer them. Just to kind of bring together some of the takeaways from what you've shared so far. It sounds like, key to be able to have, what your information somewhere that people can get at it. Jelly talked about the intranet. Victoria talked about a lot of different ways that you do it, but this multimodal segment, the communications, and leveraging word of mouth. Your best, whether that's with your ERGs, you call them BRGs, if you have ambassadors, it's really understanding that you don't have to have an HR title in order to be a DNA carrier of good culture and of good information throughout the organization. That's like one big area. Second takeaway is approaching this well-being, as Victoria was talking about early on, from a holistic perspective, right? There's 5 pillars there. They're all intertwined, and knowing that well-being is more than just physical, but it's also mental, financial, family, a new category might all be indicating, and more. And then this notion of giving employees permission, permission to care for themselves, giving managers permission to set a different tone, cut meetings short, share Gawker videos like we do at WBD, but go for a walk with your team just to show they care. The postcard example that we talked about. And then the last 2 takeaways so far, that benefits aren't a cost center, but they and investments in well-being will impact the business. And so being able to understand, Shelley, when you saw, oh my gosh, more people needed this than we ever imagined, there's a real impact on the business if those employees don't get the resources, the help that they need, and making that obvious to everyone up and down the company. And then the last takeaway, regular reporting helps with transparency. So when you listen, tell people what you heard, and be prepared for the results, and making sure you show them that they're heard. Those are some of the takeaways so far. And I'll be happy to write those down rather than just talk about them, make them available to anyone who needs them afterward. Okay, question we got. What predictions do you have for employee well-being in the year ahead? Crystal ball time. I will go first with Victoria.
Let's see. Predictions for, I think that as a society, we're putting there's a lot more emphasis on employee well-being. I think that it's, like you said at the beginning, Lorna, it's no longer a nice to have, it's really a need to have. And so I think that as we start, as we continue the conversation, and I think this, being connected all the time, while a lot of times it's like, I need to be disconnected. I think because we're so connected in social media and whatnot, and all the influences that, like external influences, and so much information sharing is leading to companies that didn't always value well-being to start leveraging programs. I know that you have different industries where, we're in the office 3 days a week. That's kind of our culture. We have a hybrid culture. Flexibility is super important. I think you're seeing a lot of banks now leaning into flexibility to some extent. What does that look like? Where typically like a bank would never have flexibility, right? Like totally generalizing here. But I think my predictions for 2024, that well-being will continue to become or to be a super important factor in the employee experience and for companies, big or small.
Awesome. Shelley?
Yeah, I agree. Every company, for the most part, it's going to offer your medical, dental, and vision. And that's not what's drawing people to the company. It is the well-being portion, and that the company truly cares about them, their families. And I think mental health is that's not going to go anywhere. And I think it's going to take years for us to kind of, I don't know if we'll ever get that under control with the way society is right now, but just, giving more and more resources for employees and their families. Again, I know for us, we really see the need with dependents. So, we focus in on them a little bit more, and just letting people know they're not alone. Mental health and just having that stigma. Everybody seems to have a therapist right now, and that's a good thing. So just, I think mental
Yeah.
health is going to continue.
I think what I'm seeing in terms of trends, my predictions are that, one, we're going to continue to have well-being as a priority, but we're going to continue to, in the face of cost cutting in general. So companies are going to be faced with cost cutting. We're not seeing the well-being budgets being reduced, but they're not growing at the same rate that they would have for the last few years. And so that therefore then leads into essentially needing to consolidate or deliver, what you want to do more, but you're not going to get more. So you're kind of delivering more with less. And so this trend toward getting more out of the vendors that you do have, I think that is a trend, and it should be, asking for more, making sure that you understand everything that they can help you with, explaining to your vendors, these are our priorities. This is what we're working on. Not only was I down in Minneapolis with Target recently, but also in Atlanta at Delta Airlines. And it was literally the CHRO on down explaining corporate priorities. This is what we need to achieve. How can you help us? So I think that is a trend, asking for more specific, impact and results. And then the other area of big trend I'm seeing is with the proliferation of the need for GLP-1s, which are, of course, the diabetes and weight loss drugs. There is such an increased appetite for them. I'm sorry for the horrible pun. And companies struggling with, how are we going to deal with this? Because in many respects, I read an article recently about this. They seem like they are truly the magic, the magic pill, their injections right now that we've been missing to cope with these real serious health issues. But on the other hand, it's very expensive, and we can't afford to pay for everyone who wants them to get them. And so looking for ways, I call them on-ramps and off-ramps for these medications, that the right people, you do get them, but that you're not on them forever. And you have a way of creating, holistic change to be able to sustain this healthier you that results. So I would say cost cutting, consolidation, and GLP-1s and weight loss would be the ones that I see for next year. I think we could keep on talking for another hour, but we are up on time today. So I want to just big thank you, Shelley and Victoria. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing what you're doing. And, I think it's pretty great if you can be a WOW or a WBD employee now. So hopefully that'll help you continue to attract and retain your top talent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Melissa, I will hand it back to you. Oh, she's just commented, thanking us and for sharing our excellent knowledge. Well, one thing that we're happy to have done that. So if people want, I think that there'll be an email coming out with a link to the recording if you need it. And for any of the takeaways, let's figure out how to get that to folks if they want it. You can always just shoot me an email, Lorna@Grocker, not hard. And I can help connect everyone if they want to have follow-up conversations with either of our esteemed panelists. So thank you. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.